Tonight, Eye on America. Are nursing home patients getting the care they need, or is more money ending up with investors? Then, the Negro League's forgotten legends are getting major league recognition, and pandemonium is returning to the nation's capital on the CBS Evening News.
Well, the jury in Donald Trump's criminal trial out of New York has returned to the courtroom, and so has the former president.
In 2024, with your voice and your power, we will win again.
We have been very clear with Israel on the imperative, in this instance, as in other instances, to immediately investigate and determine exactly what happened and why it happened.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Former President Trump's legal fate, at least in one jurisdiction facing one set of charges, is tonight in the hands of a New York jury. Day one of deliberations in his criminal case there has just ended. The 12 jurors will return tomorrow as they consider the 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. The former president, during one of the breaks in legal action today, slammed the process.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged.
Our Errol Barnett is outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Errol, summarize the day. What did the jury ask for, and what might it mean?
Major, for the first time, these 12 New Yorkers will now have the ability to discuss this historic case with each other and determine if Donald Trump is guilty or not guilty. The first clues 4 hours into deliberation as to which aspects of this case they're most interested in all relate to either testimony from Michael Cohen or Trump confidant David Pecker, or conversations that took place in Trump Tower. The prosecution has always maintained that an August 2015 meeting at Trump Tower was the core and the nexus of a conspiracy ahead of the 2016 election to effectively mislead voters by having David Pecker, a former tabloid publisher, suppress negative stories about Trump, amplify negative stories about his opponents, and effectively pave the way for him to get to the White House. Some of the other key testimony that jurors have requested transcripts of that they will hear first thing tomorrow relate to David Pecker's phone conversation with Donald Trump as it related to Karen McDougal. At that time, Pecker testified that Trump encouraged him to purchase McDougal's story in order to kill it. Why is this relevant? Because the judge instructed the jury that in order to adjudicate this case, they have to divorce their personal opinions, their personal bias. Donald Trump is innocent until proven guilty, and the jurors have to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump falsified the checks to Michael Cohen, these business records, in order to further another crime. That other crime, which makes all of this a felony, would be pursuing legal office through unlawful means. The prosecution has said the suppression of negative stories in this conspiracy is the proof that there was an unlawful intent in the first place. And so that's this early indication, with only a few hours of deliberation, that these jurors are focusing on the law and trying to follow the judge's instructions to them as closely as possible.
That's a brilliant summary, Errol, and I'm so grateful for it. You mentioned twice the instructions to the jurors from the judge. As I understand it, they've asked for those to be represented to them in some form or fashion. How will that happen? What might that mean?
It's almost an archaic kind of relic of the New York judicial process. The jurors have a laptop, and the laptop contains the hundreds of pieces of evidence throughout this 6-week trial. But the hundreds of pages, or I think it was like a few dozen pages of Judge Merchan's jury instructions to them, is not with them in the jury deliberation room. And so as they all have these conversations with each other, this cross-section of New Yorkers, men and women of different ages, from different professional backgrounds, they want to make sure that they're following the guidance from the judge. So the day ended by them asking the judge or a clarification, whereas the judge said, well, if you want me to reread the instructions. That will take an hour. So perhaps narrow exactly what it is you want reread. And all of that will be read to the jurors tomorrow morning. But yes, they have a laptop. They've got the digital access to the evidence that was presented in this case. But if they want to be reminded, it's kind of like when you take one of those tests and it's a closed note test. If they want to be reminded as to what the jury instructed them, they'll need to specifically ask for that guidance.
Excellent summary, as always. Errol Barnett, outside the courthouse in Manhattan. Thank you so very much. President Biden and Vice President Harris campaigned in Pennsylvania today in an effort to strengthen support for their re-election campaign among a key constituency, African Americans. President and Vice President launched a nationwide black voter outreach initiative while visiting Girard College in Philadelphia. President Biden devoted part of his remarks to criticizing former President Trump's record on race.
It's the same guy who wanted to tear gas you as you peacefully protested George Floyd's murder. The same guy who still calls the Central Park Five guilty, even though they were exonerated. He's that landlord who denies housing applications because of the color of your skin. He's that guy who won't say Black Lives Matter and invokes neo-Nazi Third Reich terms.
After the rally, the president also visited a black-owned small business in the city and spoke with local business leaders. Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe. Ed joins us from Wilmington, Delaware. Ed, always great to see you. Tell us more about this initiative today and what it exposes about a weakness within the re-election campaign.
We should point out, Major, we're in Wilmington, better known as Southern Pennsylvania, because the president is coming here tonight after wrapping up those campaign events in nearby Philadelphia to acknowledge and to mark the death of his son, whose anniversary is tomorrow. But the focus today in Philadelphia is quite an urgent one. While he continues to maintain a big lead among black voters across the country, it has softened, and in some cases by double digits. If you look at current CBS News battleground tracking polling, for example, in Pennsylvania among likely black voters compared to 4 years ago in the exit polls, he's down 10% among them, with former President Donald Trump making gains. Why that matters? Elections in Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, the battlegrounds are all going to be decided by single digits, by maybe four, just five figures. Any erosion of support among key constituencies to the Democratic voting coalition, black voters, younger voters, women, Latinos, is a big alarm bell to the president and his team, and a reason why they've got to make sure they're shoring it up. So 8 figures planned in advertising and outreach starting in the coming days. Notable that he had with him at this event today not only the vice president, of course, his top surrogate, but also Maryland Governor Wes Moore, Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor, who's also black, the mayors of places like Kansas City and Baltimore, who will be seen as validators across their cities and states and their regions more broadly. The hope is to have small business owners, big business owners, ministers of all sorts across the country doing what they can to validate the message and making sure that black voters especially understand the importance of reelecting the president. And it was notable, as you just played there, how directly now and how specific he's getting in attacking the former president for things he has done and said that he believes are detrimental to black voters across the country.
Ed, is there something the campaign has pinpointed about this softness in support among African-American voters? Is it lack of appreciation? Is it lack of awareness? Is it lack of enthusiasm?
It's all of that. And it's best described by a woman named Stephanie Brown James, who we spoke with earlier today. She's with a group called the Collective PAC, which is designed to reach black voters. But she held the job of reaching black voters for President Barack Obama's reelection campaign back in 2012. Listen to how she describes the challenge that Mr. Biden now faces.
We have to get out and talk to voters. In 2012, we kept hearing that voters were saying, black voters were saying, we don't know what President Obama has done for us. And I think the same holds true, where we have to get out there and talk about the accomplishments. But part of that is going door to door, talking to voters wherever they are every single day. That ground game is so key this year, just as it was in 2012. And it's going to be critical if the Biden-Harris campaign is going to win this year.
So in essence, her argument is that things haven't necessarily changed that much in terms of reaching this core constituency. They just have to be reminded. They have to be told. They have to be reached with 8-figure spending. But the challenge for the Biden campaign, for the Trump campaign, for any organization trying to reach people these days is the way people are consuming or receiving information has changed. And that's a sort of an existential thing for anybody who's in marketing, advertising, or journalism, for that matter. And so they acknowledge it's going to be a little harder this time. And it's part of why they're trying to rely so much more on those local leaders, municipal, religious, economic leaders, to reach people and do it in a more untraditional way, given that public elected officials, certainly these days, aren't held in this high regard.
Trying to find voters where they are. Ed O'Keefe in Wilmington, Delaware. Thanks so very much. Day one of jury deliberations in former President Trump's criminal trial has wrapped up. There is no verdict. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson is standing by. We're so glad to say that. To break down the day's legal news, you are streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to America Decides. The first criminal trial of an American president is now in the hands of a Manhattan jury. The 12 New Yorkers on that jury began deliberations today. Of course, they must decide whether or not to convict the former president or acquit him, or possibly there could be a hung jury. Day one has ended. No verdict. They'll come back tomorrow. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now. Jessica, I'm always so grateful to have you with us because you help us focus on what matters and look away from what may be interesting but doesn't matter as most. What are the most meaningful, from your vantage point, legal takeaways from today?
Well, I think the most meaningful is that the judge reminded us of what we should all remember, that people are presumed innocent in this country, that it is the prosecutor's burden to prove that there is guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that we can't take anything from the former president's decision not to testify, that we can't infer, oh, it must be that he really has something to hide. I think the next kind of bucket of things that were particularly meaningful today, obviously what the jury asked. The jury went straight to the heart of the prosecution's case here. Their questions focused on that Trump Tower meeting. And specifically, I think what they're asking is for clarification on the prosecution's argument that there was this criminal conspiracy that was entered into in order to try and catch and kill stories that would have harmed the Trump candidacy for president. And not just that there was that criminal conspiracy, but that the former president is connected to it. The next thing they did, showing that they're taking their jobs very seriously, is they said, we want to hear more about the jury instructions. Can you read some of them back to me? So this indicates to me they're taking their job really seriously. They're going to the heart of the prosecution's argument. And I think that it will be fascinating to see what happens tomorrow if there are more questions.
Jessica, you talked about that request for the Trump Tower meeting and the prosecution's assertion that it was part of a larger effort with intent to commit a felony, which is what takes these business document falsifications and raises them to the level of a felony. The jury's curiosity about that, there's no way to know, but do you interpret that as something that is something the prosecution would regard as a net positive?
I think so. One thing I would just clarify is it's not actually intent to commit another felony. And I think this is where this case gets complicated. And this is where the defense is hoping it just gets too complicated. And so what we have, according to the prosecution theory, is actually misdemeanor plus misdemeanor equals felony. The prosecution is saying here there was a falsification of business records, and they have to prove that Trump intended to falsify those business records, that he knew they were fraudulent. That's the misdemeanor. Step two, getting us up to a felony. And why were they falsified? To commit or conceal another crime. But that other crime can still be a misdemeanor. You can add those two misdemeanors up to a felony. The other crime that they're looking at is a New York state law that says don't unlawfully interfere with an election. And then what's unlawful interference? The prosecution has then walked through, maybe it's federal campaign finance violations, maybe it's tax violations, maybe it's other fraudulent business records. But I think it shows that the prosecution has work to do here. They have work to get the jury to the finish line of a conviction.
I want to ask you about something else that happened today, Jessica, completely unrelated to the Trump trial, because I think with your two answers, we've covered a lot of the basic and essential legal ground for today. Associate Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito informed Congress today by letter that he will not recuse himself from any of the matters related to January 6th or former President Trump, saying the controversies such as they exist over flags flown at his properties are entirely the fault of his wife. His wife is an independent actor. He didn't confer with her, didn't deal with her, and none of this violates understood and accepted ethics on the Supreme Court. Your reaction to that or assessment?
So my reaction is this is entirely predictable. I think there was no chance that Justice Alito was going to recuse himself. I think he firmly believes that he does not need to, that he has not done anything wrong. The one thing that I would say is that these ethics codes are complicated, but when it comes down to it, they're asking about whether or not it might appear to the public like a judge is biased, like a judge possesses actual bias. You don't need to, in the words of the Supreme Court opinions, actually possess the bias, but it has to look like you might. Justice Alito is saying that's not going to happen. People will understand spouses are separate people with separate actions, and they don't always act in concert together. And I think some people would say it looks bad enough that when it comes to the January 6 cases, he should have stepped down.
Jessica Levinson, as always, thank you very much.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken.
dozens of lives lost. Now, a new revelation. A U.S. bomb was used in Sunday's deadly strike on Rafah. What this means as Israel intensifies its attacks on that region. You are streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. Eyewitnesses in Gaza tell CBS News Israeli forces are pushing deeper into Gaza's southern city of Rafah. Israel's national security advisor said today that military operations in Gaza will last at least through the end of this year. That news comes after an Israeli strike in Rafah over the weekend killed dozens of Palestinians, many of them women and children. CBS News foreign correspondent MTS Tayeb has more from Jerusalem.
Well, Sunday's attack on the displacement camp triggered global outrage with those horrifying scenes of bodies burned and mutilated beyond recognition. Now, the scale of the devastation caused by the Israeli airstrike also raised questions about the type of weapons used. Images gathered from the blast site show the remains of what 3 independent weapons experts told CBS News is an American-made GBU-39 warhead with a payload of 17 kilos. All 3 agreed the distinctive shape of the GBU-39, especially its tail, helped them identify the remains, and that the clearly identifiable serial number or cage code on the specific munition traced it to a California-based weapons manufacturer. Now, Israeli military spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the strike targeted 2 senior Hamas commanders and confirmed that 2 munitions with small warheads also weighing 17 kilos were used in the strike. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Israel was investigating the case, saying that absent a complete investigation, the U.S. cannot verify whether the small diameter weapons were used in the strike. And this is as eyewitnesses tell CBS News Israel is now widening its offensive in Rafah after tanks moved into the heart of the city for the first time following the displacement of over 1 million Palestinians from there in the last few weeks, many to an unknown fate. Major.
MTS Tayeb, thank you. Margaret Brennan joins me here on the set. She is, of course, CBS News' chief foreign affairs correspondent and the moderator of Face the Nation. Margaret, isn't it true that in most instances, if there is a Israeli military activity anywhere, U.S. weapons are probably more likely than not to be involved?
Yes. The United States is the largest weapons supplier. Israel does have a pretty robust domestic manufacturing capability. In fact, the United States has an unusual arrangement, really helps directly invest in it, unlike any other country. But the United States is the chief weapons provider. Absolutely.
And in this context, viewed politically, the confirmation that U.S. weapons were involved in this particularly horrific incident, does that enlarge the scope of political problems for the Biden White House as it tries to deal with this ongoing conflict and all of the strategic dilemmas it presents for Israel and the United States?
Well, you know, reporters are trying to pin down exactly what was used and what happened because the story has changed a few times. If you remember yesterday from the White House podium, John Kirby said that according to Israel's claims, it was a secondary explosion, not the strike that caused the fire. Hagari, who was addressed there by Imtiaz, has also said they're investigating what happened with the fire that caused the civilian casualties. So they're trying to separate out the munition from the incident and suggesting that perhaps there was a secondary cause for it. But the bottom line here is that you're right. You know, the United States is the largest weapons provider here. Odds are that the U.S. was involved in some way, a shape or form in terms of that munition and its origins, but also, broadly speaking, what worries U.S. intelligence officials so much is that regardless of this one single strike, it is the United States' unequivocal support and defense of Israel to date that has made it viewed in the eyes of many in the region as completely signing off on all of this.
And whether it wants to be or not viewed as complicit in events like this that cause such repulsive video and damage and death of civilians.
Right. And we are in a social media environment where anyone with a phone is seeing those horrific, and that was a word used by the Secretary of State, horrific images, and that is an extremely powerful recruitment tool. The head of U.S. intelligence said that this will have generational impact, the war itself and the civilian casualties.
Speaking of Secretary of State Antony Blinken, let's listen to some sound relevant to this from today.
We have been very clear with Israel on the imperative in this instance, as in other instances, to immediately investigate and determine exactly what happened and why it happened. And if accountability is necessary, to make sure that there is accountability.
You know the Secretary of State very well. I know him less well, but I detect a kind of hardening fatigue in that answer. Do you?
Absolutely. And he chose his words very carefully. It was our own Olivia Gazis who put that question to him and made it personal, in really directing it towards him, his review, his building that had signed off, remember, on that national security memorandum, saying that while it could be assessed that Israel has used U.S.-provided weapons in ways that are not consistent with international humanitarian law, that the U.S. couldn't yet determine that they had violated
Can't be
weapons.
absolutely sure.
Can't be absolutely sure. Gave him plausible deniability. And so Olivia made that personal there. You said, you know, not clear that this had violated. What do you think now? And he was very carefully choosing his words there and saying he could not verify what it is that the Israeli military was claiming. It needed to be investigated. He called it horrific, but he also said even if this was targeted, even if this was the small diameter munition that Israel says it was, even in those circumstances, you can have terrible, horrific, unintended consequences. And he pivoted back towards the argument he's been trying to make to the Israeli government, which is, what is your plan for what comes next? because, as he warned there is potentially a fate worse than Hamas. He called it jihadis. He said you're going to have an insurgency that you cannot extinguish if you continue to do this.
But as you well know, Margaret, the Israelis say, look, Hamas is here now. They're there. They're our enemy. Our strategic imperative is to not deplete or reduce their capabilities, but to eradicate their capabilities. And the only way to do that is to accept a certain amount of civilian casualties because Hamas embeds itself among Palestinian civilians. That is their argument. That has not been globally persuasive. It is still persuasive within the Biden White House. True?
It is to a certain extent, but even the Secretary of Defense has said you only defeat a bad idea with a better one. And that is why, Mr. Netanyahu, tell me how this story ends. Where does this go? What is next? The United States continues to present, the Biden administration continues to present the Netanyahu government with suggestions as to how to extract itself, not just how to carry out an operation in Rafah, but who's going to operate this gate? Who's going to operate this? Do you really want to have a military occupation of this area? Here's what it's going to cost you in blood, sweat, and treasure. Do you really want to do this? If you do that, do you really call yourself a democracy? If you want to be a democracy and you want the integrity of the state of Israel to be upheld as the Jewish state, here's how you do it. And laying out and trying through the diplomacy and the pressure to get that argument forward. And you heard it from the secretary. Very frustrated.
And when they talk about jihadis, essentially what I hear the Biden administration saying is you may get rid of Hamas, but you don't know what you may inspire that's not named Hamas that could be as lethal or possibly more. Who
is viewed as even more extreme, not linked to a political cause, however wrong-headed. The argument of violence as achieving that cause, but someone who is just completely nihilistic. That's what I understood the Secretary of State trying to say when he said you could have a worse fate, you could have jihadis.
Indeed. Margaret Brennan, as always, thank you so very much. From the court to the campaign trail, former President Trump awaits a verdict in the New York case, while President Biden stumps for votes in Pennsylvania. We are tracking all the dynamics in the race for the White House. We'll do some more of that next, right here on America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
This is 5 weeks, and 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal.
Former President Trump awaits a verdict, so does the rest of the nation. Meanwhile, President Biden was on the trail campaigning in Pennsylvania. Nancy Cook and Tom LaBianco join us now. Nancy is a senior national political correspondent for Bloomberg News. Tom is a national politics reporter for 24 Site News. Great to see you both. The politics of the trial. I want to run a theory by the both of you, get your response. For 5 weeks, as the trial has gone on, the country has essentially been presented early 20th century technology, transcripts and pastel drawings, while Trump gets to move and speak using the medium of the current era. Do you think that has played as a net advantage? I ask you both, Nancy, then Tom.
Sure. I mean, I think the Trump campaign has been plotting since the fall about the way to turn this trial to their political advantage. They don't like it, but they have had a whole campaign strategy around merging the courthouse with the campaign rally and trying to make his appearances outside of the courthouse like a rally. And he's done that. We've seen him address spectators in the morning, in the afternoon. They've really tried to make it so that he can frame each day's news and so that he is sort of the last word because there's no cameras in the courtroom.
Right. And Tom, it doesn't matter the degree of falsity, which often riddles through the things he says about the trial or the process or his rights or what he's being denied or et cetera. He still gets words up against transcripts and drawings.
Yes, I mean, we had David Pecker on the stand telling us how they just made up these stories whole cloth in 2016.
Confirming all sorts of things that were denied in the moment in 2016. Believe me, I was there, and I got all the furious, forceful, you go yourself denials.
Yes.
Now it's all true, all established.
Yes.
On the record.
When they text you and say it's BS.
Actually, it's true.
It reminds me a lot of before there was Roger Stone, there was Roy Cohn. Mm-hmm. And this is what Roy Cohn tutored him on.
Right. Deny.
Yeah. And it's a circus. It's a spectacle. And they're running laps around the legal system. Politically.
Right.
Yes. Still awaiting the verdict, clearly.
I want to run something by you. The Wall Street Journal had an interesting story today about Elon Musk and former President Trump spending a lot of time on the phone. Some close to Trump suggesting that if he's elected, and that's a big if, he might find some room for Elon Musk in an advisory capacity. Let's recall something that Elon Musk was asked and said about Trump in a different era. Let's play that.
Do you see any similarities between you and him?
I mean, there aren't zero similarities.
Do you support him?
I think there are some things that I think are good.
Very fine news program, 60 Minutes. Sounded hesitant then. It sounds he's like less hesitant now. Tom, any sense of this?
He's come into the Trump fold more and more increasingly. I mean, remember, it was just about a year ago where they had that terrible launch of the DeSantis campaign after he had taken over X.com, Twitter. Mm-hmm. And he was full on in DeSantis' world, But, this is concurrent with a lot of the billionaires coming back into the fold for Trump. Saw the story about Steven Schwartzman coming back in. A lot of the people who said they were never Trump, they could never support
After
a loser.
January 6th, could not come back on the reservation.
Yep, coming back.
Now, Nancy, the gate appears open and they appear to be walking through.
Yeah, I would just sound a note of caution, though.
Please.
Because, the DeSantis campaign, which I was covering quite closely, really was waiting for a check from Elon Musk for months. And they thought that they would get one because he hosted that Twitter Spaces, as Tom said. And they felt like they had an in with him. That check never arrived. And so the Trump campaign does not have a check from Elon. What they have now is, Trump is speaking directly with Elon Musk. I confirmed that this afternoon. He is, there has been some chat about an advisory role for him if Trump won the White House. And I think that they have some things they talk about in common, like, the space program or EVs, but I would just, he's not a donor yet.
Right.
I think that the Trump campaign is looking for money and they are on the hunt for money and they see Elon as someone who could be helpful to them in innumerable ways.
And both of these, Trump and Musk, are pretty adept at the negotiation and giving letting people draw false inferences, if you will.
Right.
And that's, according to your reporting, where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, they have met in Florida. They met at a fundraising breakfast. I think that they're talking on the phone now. But, I will just wait and see if the check actually arrives or if it's just more of like the two of them sort of talking on the phone about some tech things.
Tom, there was a story in Politico this week about the freak-out factor within Biden world. That's an overused term.
Yeah.
Freakouts in May don't amount to much in a November election cycle. How would you assess the mentality or the bottom lineness of the Biden campaign?
Well, you have seen Biden in particular start to turn up the heat. And, today in, battleground Pennsylvania, his home state, going out there, in a way that they were reticent just a few months ago. And going out there, he had this quote where he said, imagine if it had been black folks storming the Capitol on January 6th. What do you think would have happened then? And, he made a joke about maybe Trump injected the bleach and it's still messing with his brain. So he's,
turning up the heat, possibly because he's feeling some heat.
Yes.
See what I did there? Nancy Cook, Tom LaBianca. Thank you very much for your time. Speaking of temperatures, as they soar and oceans rise and air quality deteriorates, here's a question. Can the climate crisis be won? Former presidential candidate Tom Steyer thinks, that it can. He will join us next on America Decides to talk about his new book. As I mentioned, you're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Tom.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. April was the Earth's warmest ever. NOAA says it marked the 11th straight month of record-breaking heat. Former presidential candidate and climate investor Tom Steyer joins us now. He is the author of the new book, Cheaper, Faster, Better: How We Will Win the Climate War. Tom, first question, what makes you a subject expert in this world?
Well, I've been a professional investor for 40 years, Major.
Yeah.
And I've been looking in technology very closely. And I've also studied climate for about 17 years. So I think I can say with a lot of confidence that there is bad news coming out of the natural world. You mentioned the fact that this is the hottest year in history that when humans have been on the Earth. But looking at technology, I can tell you this too. The technology that people are developing, that they have developed, is fantastic. We have an ability to actually win this in the marketplace. That's why I call it cheaper, faster, better products. That's how we'll actually solve this problem, by producing products that people want to buy, that are clean, and that the United States should be leading the way on this.
Paint that picture, products that people can wrap their minds around. What is it going to look like 10 years from now in this optimistic appraisal?
Well, it isn't even 10 years from now.
Okay, 5 years from now.
I mean, no, today.
Today.
If you look today, solar and wind are substantially cheaper than fossil fuel energy. Most Americans don't know that.
Ask Texas.
Okay, let's ask Texas, because in fact, in Texas, in the last 3 years, Texas has tripled its solar. Ask Texas. They're the biggest producer of wind energy by far in the United States of America. At the same time that Texas politicians are talking about how terrible it is, Texas is actually going renewable.
Right.
Let's talk about something else that happened today. People talk a lot about electric vehicles, and they say, oh my goodness, people don't buy enough electric vehicles. Stellantis is talking about a $25,000 Jeep, all electric. BYD, which is a Chinese company, has a $14,000 plug-in hybrid that will go 1,200 miles. So we're seeing products in the EV and the electric vehicle space
bringing that price point down
and disruptive.
Right.
So Americans are going to sit there and go like, really? Maybe this is the cheaper, faster, better. And let me tell you one last story, which is this. One of my very best friends in the world is what I would think of as a business Republican. Old-fashioned Republican, believes that's what drives American prosperity for everybody. He's also a car nut from California. When I first met him at 18, he took me out in his car up to 100 miles an hour to show me how fast he could take it. So about 7 years ago, he bought a Tesla, and I was like, Matthew, are you out finally to save the world? And he said, absolutely not. It handles fantastically. It goes from 0 to 60 faster than any European sports car. This is a great drive. And that's what I'm talking about. Cheaper, faster, better. How we're going to win is by having great products where they're people of their own volition say, let's do it. That's fantastic.
So your point is that investment in private markets will solve this problem faster than government regulations or mandates?
Well, look, government can do whatever it wants. But in the world we're in, what we have is the world in the climate response is, it's not about a silver bullet. It's about silver buckshot. Dozens of companies with dozens of products solving all the separate problems in this one by one, but with really great young people. I mean, in my book, In my book, I try to highlight some of the fantastic young people who are coming up with amazing new products in cement. We're coming up with amazing products in terms of putting electricity on the grid that people wouldn't think of, just so you know that they're brilliant people doing brilliant things, and the products are here and the cost curves are crossing, and we're really seeing this real time.
1 minute, assess Biden policy in this realm.
Well, President Biden and his administration have passed by far the strongest climate legislation in American history. By far. In the context of American history, he is by far the best climate president. Now, no one in America seems to know that. I read polls where they ask people what he's done and they go, hasn't really acted on climate. Well, in fact, this administration has been incredibly active on climate. They have a great story to tell. They've got 6 months to do it. I expect they'll do it. But look, this is a great opportunity for America. It's a challenge, absolutely. This is what we were built to do. And we're not doing it as one party. This has got to be an American story of all of us coming together, solving it together, and remembering how to win as a country.
Tom Steyer, the book, Cheaper, Faster, Better. Thank you very much. A toss-up in the Tar Heel state. The Cook Political Report has updated its rating in the race for North Carolina governor. We'll discuss that next. You are streaming and very much enjoying America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Welcome back to America Decides. According to a nonpartisan analysis from our friends at the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, Democrats and their chances of holding on to the North Carolina governor's mansion in November, well, it's becoming a bit less likely. The Cook Political Report with Amy Walter has shifted this race from lean Democrat to toss-up. Republican Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson faces the state's Attorney General Josh Stein. They are both vying to succeed Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat who is term limited. Jessica Taylor joins us now. She is the Senate and Governor's editor for the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. Jessica, great to see you. Why the shift in this governor's race in North Carolina?
So North Carolina is sort of an anomaly for Democrats, at least at the gubernatorial level, because we have seen Cooper, who ousted a Republican governor in 2016, even as Trump carried the state, won re-election in 2020, even as Trump carried the state once again. And if we look historically, over the past century, there have actually only been 3 Republican governors in the Tar Heel state's history. So I think we started this race in lean Democrat because of that advantage and because of a lot of the controversies that Robinson has. He's made a lot of anti-Semitic demeaning remarks about women and women in leadership and the LGBTQ plus community. And so I was really skeptical that this could become a much closer race, but we've had the primary in March, and actually Robinson did have a primary opponent that spent $5 million on air attacking him for some of these things. But what we have seen consistently in the polls over the past 6 weeks or so is that this is a very tight race. And our new polling that came out, the Swing State Project that we are conducting polls with, along with BSG Strategies, a Democratic firm, and GS Strategies, a Republican firm, showed that this race was tied. And that's consistent with the other polls that we have seen in this race. And so really what is driving this is that we have Trump winning this state by much more than he did even in 2016 and 2020. And that just becomes more difficult for Stein to outrun him, because even Roy Cooper, when he heavily outspent his Republican opponent, Dan Forest, in 2020, only won by a couple of points, and it was much closer than some of the polling predicted. So if we do see voters splitting their ticket, it's much more common in races for governor, where you're not voting in the Senate, you're voting for which party you want to control something. You're not doing that with governors. But at this juncture, we have to say that it is a tied race based on the numbers, and my Republican and Democratic sources in the state agree with that.
And Jessica, as you well know, Democrats associated with the Biden re-election campaign and on the campaign itself circle North Carolina as a possible place where they could make inroads, flip that state, expand the electoral map. What does this governor's race analysis tell you about the prospects of accomplishing that from the Democrats' perspective?
I still think if you're looking at where the Biden's path to 270 is, the Biden campaign's path, it is in Michigan, it is in Wisconsin, it is in Pennsylvania.
Where it was in 2020.
Exactly. But, he's doing worse in Arizona and some of those Sun Belt states and Georgia. And then I still think North Carolina is still a little bit of a reach, but there are some Democrats I've talked to that when they look, for instance, at the numbers in Arizona and Georgia, that they think that North Carolina might be slightly more favorable. Our swing state polling there shows that Trump is still leading there by 7 points. So we'll see. We'll see if they end up investing money there and how much. But if I'm them, and when we're looking at where the polling numbers are, he has a much more plausible path through those, that blue wall in the Midwest.
How much does Mark Robinson's ability to raise money influence this analysis of where the race currently stands in North Carolina?
This is a key difference because, again, when I looked at this race initially, Robinson looked like such a problematic candidate. And now this race has not been fully litigated on the air. Neither Josh Stein, the Democrat, or Mark Robinson, the Republican, have gone up on air. So both of them will have the money to define themselves. And Stein has far outraised Robinson. But Robinson is raising very real money. He's already raised over $10 million, and he's on pace to bring in the most of any Republican gubernatorial candidate ever. That's including Pat McCrory, that was the most recent Republican to win. I think there were a lot of comparisons early on to him, like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, that really handily lost that race to Josh Shapiro in 2022. But the key difference was that Mastriano never had a functional campaign. He wasn't raising money. So we have to also look at that as a facet of our analysis, that he is putting together a real campaign with real money, and that's something that Democrats very much are noticing in the race.
With all the details, Jessica Taylor, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
President Biden and former President Trump agreed to 2 debates earlier this month. They went around the group that has organized them for decades. I sat down with the co-founder and co-chair of the Commission on Presidential Debates for the takeout to discuss these candidates' decision.
I think it has become part of the tradition of how we elect the people who lead our country as president and vice president. And at a time where so many institutions that we've known about over the last 20, 30, whether you're talking about schools, whether you're talking about religion, whether you're talking about corporations, everything is sort of disappearing in how we're going forward. And I would hate to see this also disappear. But that's not to say that if we don't do debates in this cycle, because either they've done it and succeeded, and I said the other night in an interview that if they're able to succeed with these 2 debates that they're planning, they're done right, they educate the American people, and I will give them a salute.
You can hear more of that conversation on The Takeout with Frank Fahrenkopf this Sunday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. We are entering, this is exciting, a new phase of panda diplomacy. The Smithsonian announced today 2 pandas will soon call the Washington, D.C. Zoo home. 2-year-old male panda Bao Li and 2-year-old female panda Qing Bao will be sent over by China. They're expected to arrive by the end of this year. It comes 6 months after a family of 3 pandas was returned to China from the National Zoo. Well, that does it for today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for May 29th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. For 5 weeks, 12 men and women and 6 alternates in the Trump jury have taken in evidence on everything from Federal Express labeling practices to